Welcome to Amp Life, the #1 podcast for amputees, hosted by an amputee, and brought to you by Dilatory Orthotics and Prosthetics, located in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I'm the Brian Moe, the social media advisor for Dilatory, and I also happen to be a below-knee amputee. Let's get into today's episode. How's it going, everyone? My guest today is fellow left below knee amputee, Linda Walls. Linda, welcome to Amp Life.
Thank you.
So you're a Texas girl. Does that make you a Cowboys fan?
Unfortunately, no. I'm actually a Steelers fan. I've come from Pittsburgh, but I am so fascinated with Dak Prescott. I actually bought his jersey because I'm really watching that boy and I want to see where he goes.
I think he's the number 4 quarterback in the NFL at the moment, behind like Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, and Drew Brees. So
unbelievable.
That's pretty good company to keep.
Yeah,
but, that's exciting. You're a Steelers fan. We're here. We're located in Pittsburgh, so we always like to hear that.
Yeah, I grew up in Pittsburgh, so they will always be my home team.
What part of the city did you grow up in?
I grew up in Peters Township.
Sure.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I know where that's at. Okay, very nice. So, as you know, many people lose a limb due to infection. However, your story of ultimately losing your leg to infection is very different from most people's. Please share with us your journey and the story of how you became an amputee.
Sure. I was out walking with a friend one day, and we were just doing the usual walk. It was a couple of miles. And at the end of the walk, my foot actually really hurt. And I couldn't figure out what was going on. And I find out that my left arch in my foot collapsed. So I became a flat foot in one foot. Well, that was really strange, to say the least. So when I went and visited a podiatrist, she said it was actually common for women in their early 40s to have this happen. I've never heard of this. Of course, where's the manual when you turn 40, your warranty expires? Really makes me want to know. So we did conservative therapies for several months, and then eventually I ended up having to do surgery. During the surgery, they needed to put a little bone graft wedge to stabilize the forefoot. It's about a little 5 millimeter, really tiny, something that you wouldn't even think twice about. And that comes from a cadaver. And today, bone grafts are only tested for hepatitis and HIV, nothing else. Our blood and our organs are tested far more than any bone or tissue graft. So that's kind of disconcerting. Well, that bone graft contained one of those super resistant bugs. It was called Mycobacterium fortuitum houstonense. That's a mouthful.
That is. Wow.
And unfortunately, that bacteria spent the next 6 months in and out, hospitals with infectious disease, every antibiotic under the sun, things I've never heard of, round-the-clock infusions, the whole gamut in order to save my foot. But it ended up eating all the bones. We had 10 surgeries, removing bone after bone. And it got to the point where I'm going to have to lose my limb or lose my life. So when the final decision came, I had 12 hours from the moment they said, we're going to do amputation, to actually having the amputation done. So it was a very quick, not absorb the whole situation at hand. You're being thrown in here, you have to figure out everything you need to know as an amputee within 12 hours.
Wow. That's a bit crazy. So what kind of recovery time did you have after your amputation?
Well, it's interesting when you say recovery. I guess we all have different definitions of that. Most of us have, you would think that as an amputee, especially today, that you would have maybe what the military has, as I put it. You have a team of psychologists and personal trainers or physical therapy, occupational therapy, as well as physicians there to guide you. And in this case, you don't. You have to pretty much figure it out. I have never heard of a prosthetist before this. I had never heard of what a physiatrist was, which is a pain management doctor who prescribes physical therapy. So my therapy overall ended up being, after the amputation, my surgeon, a vascular surgeon, actually called a prosthetist out to visit me in the hospital. So that was my first introduction. Okay. They told me to come see him after the staples came out, and I did. And we scheduled within the first month. I was cast. In 2 months, I had my first leg, and I was so disappointed and I videotaped my own, that I couldn't even stand in it to walk. It hurt. It was painful. We've all been there. But it was just devastating to me because my quadricep on my left side had atrophied after 6 months in bed. So I went home and did leg lifts galore. I bought, forearm crutches. I went to PT religiously. I was doing leg lifts all the time. And I got myself up and walking on those crutches within 2 weeks. In 6 weeks, I was without the crutches. So I was very happy that I was out walking. I then attended a running clinic with Bob Gailey within 11 months and bought myself a blade and went running for the first time. I was ecstatic.
So you got a blade and you went running. I thought that I read somewhere about you that you did a triathlon.
I have not done it as an amputee. And that is my goal, ultimately. I've already done my 5Ks. I haven't run them completely. I'm having some back problems now in relation to my prosthetic and my height difference in legs, and I've had back fusion in the past. So I'm working through that, but it is ultimately my goal. One of my friends, while I was in the hospital with the foot still, threw me the gauntlet of competing in an Ironman. Which is, above and beyond who's going to go do that. But that really has stood out as an ultimate dream. If I could do even the small Ironman, it says I can do anything.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I don't know if you've heard of Scott Rigsby or not.
Name is familiar.
You can look him up on Facebook. But anyhow, I can't put my name on it right now because it's not part of the notes for our episode. But he has a book, and I literally read his book in a day. But he has a book out of how he became an amputee and went on to run, to compete in the World Ironman Championship, which is in Hawaii. And just if that's something you're really interested in doing, I recommend reading his book.
I appreciate that. I will. I'll look into it.
What he did, he started small, 5Ks and stuff. And then he did he called them, like mini triathlons, and eventually worked his way, all the way up. But it's truly, he was on one of the episodes several weeks ago, but truly just if anybody wants to do Ironman things, that's the book to read.
I appreciate that.
Yeah,
we have a
nice story.
In Dallas, is just for what it's worth, the Dallas Amputee Network, we have over 200 members. And it is so fascinating to see there are so many active amputees that are running and doing marathons and doing triathlons that I already have a lot of the work cut out for me watching these guys do it. It says that I can do it too.
Absolutely. So when you talked about your infection, you said that it came from a bone graft. Have you been involved in trying to raise awareness or to get things changed so that hospitals have to do more testing than just some basic, HIV testing on when they use bones from cadavers?
Yes, actually, I have. I've gone as far as going to Capitol Hill and meeting with senators. The ultimate, legally, there's not anything I could do. So, most people say, you could sue and for millions. No, you can't, because the FDA says this is the standard. So there's no gross negligence. So obviously the standard needs to change. Ultimately, what it comes down is I need to find a way to add one line to the regulations that says you also need to test for what they call is acid-fast bacteria. If they tested for that, that would rule out a majority of these super resistant bugs.
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
the question. And of course, it's a cost to, the FDA has to decide, hey, do we want to add that as a cost to having this done? And those are the things I'm working hard to do. I really don't want anyone else. I think I'm just the beginning of, the beginning curve with as much as we've heard about super resistant bacterias now. I think this is just the beginning of this going to happen to many others.
Yeah, it's a really scary thing when you hear about it because I know so many people that have had bone grafts on. My wife is one of them. She's had numerous bone grafts from when she's broken, her wrist and her ankle and different things when she was in an accident. And so it's scary to think about, this potential of, hey, this can really cause you an infection that could potentially kill you.
Bone grafts. Yeah. Bone grafts are used regularly in dentistry. I actually spoke with a periodontist about this. He actually pulled out one of the bone grafts boxes and pulled out the information in it and wanted to see. And in its own information, it says a 1 in 8 million chance of this happening.
Wow. That's crazy.
The statistics, though, in papers today, though, are currently saying 20% of all infections are a result of a bone or tissue graft. And outside of that, 1 in a million chance that you could lose a limb or a piece of your jaw or whatever. That's the current status.
Wow.
It's unbelievable.
That is unbelievable. Wow. Hopefully our legislators and the FDA will work to get that changed so that these things don't happen to other people moving forward.
It's just a matter of making awareness, as you pointed out, and trying to get out there and say, we need to make some changes for the protection of the people.
Absolutely. So what are some of the lessons that you've learned about yourself since becoming an amputee?
I've actually learned that I became a lot stronger and have a more driven purpose in life now. I could say that, when turning 40 and looking at the world and saying, is this it? This was not the question to ask anything. God certainly answered that one for me. Not in the way I expected, of course not. And it did. It made me a lot stronger as a person. And that I'm happy about. And being an amputee isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's just a different thing.
Right. So aside from the obvious change of losing part of your leg, how else has your life changed since you've become an amputee?
Well, it's my relationships, I think, would be the first thing that I've noticed as an amputee. I mean, we can all talk about the physical and the mental and things like that, and I can get into that. But the biggest thing for me was relationships. I've found how strong or how weak my current relationships were with people. I had my best friend at the time actually turn to me and said, she goes, I don't know how to deal with this. And I had to tell her it's not about her.
Right.
And unfortunately, we're not best friends anymore. My own brother didn't even come visit me. And I haven't seen him since. And he just really couldn't handle it, whether he wanted to admit it to himself or not. And if anything, family is the one thing you think you could count on. In my case, you couldn't. I also realized who my friends were. I had people standing up right and left. I had one of my good friends. I still laugh at this. She's a basketball player and came the day that I was getting my amputation. She actually showed up at the hospital with a cupcake with a middle finger sticking up out of it. And it really goes, and I was like, that sums it up pretty well. And then that was perfect. I mean, you just couldn't get any better. My own daughter, she's had issues in the sense of with it. She wasn't sure how to handle it. She thinks kind of the limb is kind of freaky looking, so to speak. But, she did have some funny things like right off the bat. It isn't, how are you, mama? How are you doing, mama? She said, are you going to get that placard thing so we could park in front everywhere? So there are good. On the mental side of physical, you have to decide. If you want it, you need to do the work. You have to do the work. And unfortunately, all the physical therapy out there, they don't really have a lot of information on how to work with amputees. And that's upsetting. They know how to wrap a limb, but they don't really know what we need. I actually had a prosthetist who is an amputee go visit my physical therapy clinic and educate them on what is best. So that was fantastic. Mentally, I think 90% of this is mental, though. You've really, for me, it was all mental. If I said I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. It may not be in my timeline, but if I put my mind to it, then I knew I could do it.
And, you're right, because when I first became an amputee and went to physical therapy, I mean, I expected them to have maybe not all the answers, but a lot of them for, what I needed to do to recover and to get strong. And it ended up really that I taught her more than she taught me. And I did, as nice as she was, I didn't like that dynamic. When I moved back to Pittsburgh and I got with my physiatrist, he sent me to a physical therapist who specializes in amputees. And she's the only one I've ever heard of as of right now. There's probably more in our area, I'm sure. But and it was amazing because I was no longer the teacher. I was strictly the student. And it was just a night and day difference.
Oh, that's fantastic. You just don't see that. They don't have the education. I don't know. I'm sure I hope you've heard of Bob Gailey. He does all the gait analysis, not just for walking, but for also running. And I will tell you, when I went to the running clinic in Arizona, I flew out there just for that. That group, OSER, also had a bunch of student physical therapists come out. And the first thing he told them as we partnered up with these physical therapists is you will learn more about dealing with amputees now than you ever have. And so we were to educate them. And that was fantastic because they wanted to learn.
Yeah, and that's the really important part is finding amputees that want to learn. I'm sure you see it as often as I do. We get in these groups on Facebook and people are like, "Oh, I've been an amputee for 5 years and I'm still not doing anything." And I'm just like smacking my head off the wall, like, why? Why aren't you doing something? But I think it comes down to you have to want it.
You do.
Like anything else you do.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same, as you said, it's same with work and everything. You got that, as I always I put them in 3 categories. You got the people who say, I'm going to go above and beyond. I'm going to do everything I can to make this look really good.
Right.
You have that group that's just going to do the bare minimum. Okay, I can walk, I'm done. And then you got the group that spends more time whining about what they don't have instead of actually doing the work that they need to do. And it applies everywhere.
Absolutely. It's kind of ironic, I guess, in a way. I was asking my physiatrist, I said, I need some more physical therapy. I said, and I gave him a list of specifically what I think I need. And so he's like, okay, but he's like, you need a new socket first. And I'm like, are you really kidding me right now? But the thing I think that amputees that don't see a physiatrist don't always realize is that they actually know what they're doing, most of them.
Yes.
And so, and he said, no long walks, until you get this done. And so it's very annoying. But at the same time, it's nice having someone who knows, who can say, hey, this is what's going to happen if you don't listen to me. And so, you reluctantly listen, I guess, to what they have to say. And so you mentioned Bob Gailey, and I know that he runs the clinics. He was in Pittsburgh not long ago. They had a clinic up here. I think it was actually last summer. They had a clinic up here, and he's just helped. Who knows how many amputees, but I'm sure it's in the tens of thousands of amputees that he has helped. And hopefully, I'd love to get him on the podcast someday. Hopefully.
I would just ask. I mean, absolutely reach out and ask him. I mean, I hear what you're saying. I saw people when they did the running clinic in Dallas. I was there to volunteer, and I had a lot of the amputees that I am friends with, and and to watch them run for the first time, and they, these were AKs or bilateral, was just fascinating and unbelievable. And he was giving them, you can do it if you want it. Right. That just blew my mind. I mean, that's the thing. Here's a guy who has it, and I mean, I know it's a lot of work on his part, but
right.
It's just, yes, if anyone has an opportunity to go to one of his clinics, whether it's running or walking or whatever, he's going to be at the conference, attend it. You have no idea. It will change your life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I know that talking about being active and things that we can do, post-amputation, things we get involved in, I know that you recently returned from a trip to Ireland.
Yes, that was fascinating.
First of all, let me ask you this. How was the trip itself?
Oh, it was wonderful. It was wonderful, fascinating, not wild always about the rain, but had a really good time.
Good. Yeah, I was looking at your pictures on Facebook, and it looked absolutely amazing.
It was. We had a good time.
So what has traveling as an amputee been like for you? Have you ever encountered any problems traveling since becoming an amputee?
Oh, yeah, all the time. No one wants to hear that, but you do. The first thing, if anybody I give advice to, if you're going to travel, make sure you print out the blue card from TSA that says, I am an amputee. They have this that says for special screening, because a lot of the times you're not going to have a supervisor with you. So they don't know that what's going to happen. And I always warn them in advance, I'm going to set the metal detector off, point blank, or I'm going to set off the body scanner. I'm letting you know. And every time, so as long as you're prepared in advance, you're good. And that's what a lot of people don't know. So that's the first thing. Second, just to let anyone know, if you have medicinal lotions or have to bring tools, like I actually had to bring a 10-inch torque wrench with me as a carry-on, you're allowed. If they're medical, great. But going abroad is probably the biggest challenge. We don't realize as a nation how spoiled we are with safety and how great we have with the ADA. I mean, having the Disabilities Act and having things set up that we can use wheelchairs and things like that. Really, I mean, you just don't have that abroad. And I am going to bring up Deborah Kerper. If you've not heard of her, she does travel for cruise lines and things like that. She has her own cruise line agency for disability for people in wheelchairs and so forth. And she does cruises all over the world. And she has figured it out. And kudos to her on that, because being in Ireland, as an example, there isn't anywhere that there's a safety. Like I got apartments and stuff and asked, or hotels and asked for a shower chair. They didn't even know what I was talking about.
Oh, wow.
Out of all the hotels I stayed at, only 2 of them had accessible bathrooms. And you really have to pay the extra buck to have it, so to speak. So I was in a 4-star hotel at a 5-star resort at one point, but I also did bed and breakfasts and things like that. Those 2, the high-end ones, were the only ones that had anything even remotely accessible.
Wow.
So that was a big eye-opener. Going to just regular run-of-the-mill castles, they're all over the place in Ireland, or going to see horseback riding. They've never seen an amputee, and they don't know how to handle it. They just treat you like everyone else. I mean, when I was going up the Blarney Castle, there was no way to stop going up the Blarney Castle. There was no way to get out, stop, take a rest, anything. It's 127 steps in a spiral staircase that are huge steps, and all you have is a rope to pull yourself up because there's not even a railing. And you couldn't stop, and you have a line of people behind you, so you had to truck on through. There are no warnings. There are no, hey, if you have heart problems even, don't do this.
Oh, wow.
So it's a suck it up attitude. You really have to be prepared. Even out in public, you do not see people in wheelchairs unless they're possibly tourists. You do not see people with physical disabilities anywhere. That floored me.
Yeah, that's definitely very different, and I must admit, surprising. I've not traveled abroad, so I've not had those experiences. I think that you're right. We're spoiled here, and I think we tend to assume that it's the same way everywhere you would go.
Most of being in Europe, and I do a lot of work in Paris, and I do work in England as well. The thing I've noticed, and as I said, if you are a disabled person or in any capacity, whether you're 105 or, just having heart problems going upstairs, whatever the case is, they pretty much will, as a socialized medicine state, they will actually provide all the services to you. But that kind of means you're homebound. They're not going to provide you assistance to get out, to go out to the park, to do this, that, or the other. They're going to have somebody come out and do your laundry. They're going to have somebody come out and bring food. They're going to have all that for you based on the government. That's why you don't see the people out. But to me, that's not an answer either.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. No, that's, I think that those of us who live with disability, whether it's amputation or heart problems or whatever it may be, I think we've learned, those of us, I should say, that do it somewhat successfully, have learned that it's, in order to really get your full potential, you've got to be outside, you've got to be around people, and you've got to be active.
Right.
And we know that those who just stay homebound, those are the people that we're reading about in amputee groups saying, hey, it's been 5 years and I'm not doing anything. Why not?
Right.
And so,
no, I understand that. And if you ever go to old world Europe, just be prepared for uneven steps and cobblestone and, there are no elevators, as they call lifts, necessarily to all the places you want to go. So yeah, you have to be prepared. I mean, if your mind is set that you're going to do it no matter what, then go do it. I mean, I had to have my husband help me go up a hill, though. That's why I laugh. I'm in big hills. And he had to stabilize me at the Giant's Causeway, where are these basaltic columns that are uneven, that are unique. If you've seen the pictures, I got to stand on them and walk around on them. But boy, I needed him there because they're so uneven. I mean, who knows? I could have fallen and just, hurt myself pretty bad.
So I know that you're also a certified peer visitor with Amputee Coalition.
Yes.
How has that training helped you to mentor or even empower other amputees?
It was fascinating. I did not have a peer visitor when I became an amputee. And that to me was just so discouraging. I have a very go-getter attitude, but so many aren't. They look at amputation as a death wish. And I wanted to make certain that this never happens to another amputee as long as I can help it. It's funny because in the hospitals, I found out if you're diagnosed with cancer, they have a packet to give, that the nurse station may be grabbing, or the doctors that provide you, here's all the resources you need to know. They don't have one for amputation.
That's true.
And it's terrible because, again, you're left to your own devices to figure it out. That hurts. So the training not only made certain to educate me on what is right, but it also made me realize I'm not the focus. The patient is the focus. Listen, they're the reason we're there.
Right.
And it's been very beneficial. I visited with 4 or 5 already. And during my time, just walking in the room, they're really shocked. They couldn't believe that I was even an amputee until they looked down at my leg because I'm walking. I had one Hispanic family that was a riot. The only amputation they ever knew was a boy in their village way back when had his arm cut off in a factory accident and he died. So when their daughter was having an amputation, they were thinking it's a death wish. So when I walked in, they saw that it was no big deal. They were just, going crazy. They couldn't believe it. And they're like, how is this possible? So it's good to have that and be able to provide the next step in resources that you do have people here with you. We are here as a group, and you're going to get to know a lot more, and you always have somebody to call if you need to.
And, that's a very good point because like you, when I became an amputee, there was no peer visitor. There was, and you're right. There was nothing but my own devices to figure this out. I mean, I had, the owner of the prosthetics company came in to see me when I was in the hospital, and it was that outreach, that led me to choose that company at the time. But aside from that, I knew nothing. I had no information, and I'm just like, what next?
Agreed.
I think that, having the peer visitors now is just, I think it's just one of those things that is really going to help amputees recover, maybe not physically faster, but, deal with the emotional and the mental aspect better than those of us who just are like, hey, now what? Sort of thing. So I think it's a great program.
I agree. It's a good step in the right direction for certain.
Absolutely. I know that you're a newlywed who got married last September.
Yes.
And I want
not even a year.
Not even a year. And I want to talk some about dating and sexuality as an amputee. When I Googled this, there aren't a lot of resources available for amputees when it comes to body image and learning to love ourselves and sexuality. I actually was talking to my boss this morning in the conference room, and I said, I Googled sex and sexuality for amputees, and I said, there's really nothing. And she's like, I wouldn't Google that. And I'm like, you're not an amputee. And so there's not a lot of resources out there. And I believe that a lot of times many people in the limb loss community, they're either shy or perhaps embarrassed to discuss their feelings regarding body image and sexuality. I was already married when I became an amputee, and I never had to concern myself with whether or not I would be attracted to the opposite sex post-amputation. I did concern myself with whether or not I would still be attractive to my wife. So that's a little bit of a different thing. But we sometimes see questions in support groups on Facebook. People ask how to date, or they mention that they can't find anyone to even date them. And so I've been wanting to discuss these very personal and intimate issues on Amp Life to hopefully help other amputees as they deal with these issues in their own lives. And so I want to ask you, has there been a time since becoming an amputee that you have found yourself struggling with body image?
Yeah, there is. You're going to go through that. I don't think if you don't, then something's wrong. No, I'm just kidding. You don't, you really have to, because everybody has scars.
Right.
Just some are more visible than others. And the ones that we can hide, that's never become an issue. But giving even an example, when I had my leg amputated, I had an old boyfriend of mine, again, who he wouldn't find me attractive at all. He hasn't even visited me. I mean, and we're friends and stuff like that. It's like, how does this make me any less of a person? And you just have to sit there and wonder that. And you just go, why? It's so what? I mean, in my opinion, I hadn't known any other amputees or wheelchair bound in general, but it wouldn't have, I take a person for who they are. So that would never have bothered me in the dating community. I wouldn't, care if you had all your, body or not, but maybe I'm different in that sense. But yes, I mean, I can go out with girlfriends and the guys would look and take one look at the leg and it's like, And to me, it's the same attitude I would look at with people who have money or don't have money. Or looking for the trophy wife or the trophy husband. They're looking for a specific whole picture, but that's a shallow person. And that's not somebody I would want to be with anyway. So at first it was going back to the original question. Yeah, I looked at myself and said, am I going to be attractive to anyone? Is this, and I put on 50 pounds with being in bed all the time and not being active. So that also was an image. You had to question. And I thought, well, what the heck? They're not, if somebody doesn't want to get to know me for me, then they're not worth my time anyway.
And that's a great attitude to have because a lot of people don't grasp that concept. That I just saw a post and I meant to put it in the notes and then I got to doing something else and forgot. But I just saw a post, someone talking about the whole intimacy issue, and my initial reaction was, if they don't like you for who you are, regardless of whether or not you're an amputee or anything else, they're not worth your time to begin with. And I wish people could better grasp that concept.
I think a good kudos for the amputee group, though, I have to say, is Marvel and DC Comics. I want to give them the kudos. They are making amputees look awesome.
They are, okay? Absolutely.
And, you watch the guys or the girls go, oh my God, that person's so hot. Well, guess what? They're an amputee. So if I ever got attitude, and I really haven't. If I had gotten attitude during dating, that's like, well, you're not all this. Well, you know what? Did you like this such and such person on this, then why am I any different?
Right.
But again, they're not worth my time. They really aren't. And it's sad. If people are upset that they get rejected because they're an amputee and they don't like the fact that somebody didn't like them because they are an amputee, I would rather that person not take the rejection directly. I mean, it's easier said than done. Don't take somebody else's opinion and make it your own. You need to figure out what's going on in you. Fix you. Love you. When you learn to love yourself as you are, then the rest is cream cheese.
And that's a perfect way to look at it. And when I listen to these people who talk about, they can't find someone to date or to love them or whatever they're saying at that particular moment, that my first response is that they don't even love themselves first.
They feel they need somebody. And That's the problem. You're putting the wrong direction. I mean, I've been really blessed. I'm a Christian and I have God in my life. And that was the number one thing that had me get through this. So that's my higher power. That's my belief. And so I had that complete in me that I didn't have to worry so much. But I do see people. I mean, one of the first questions I have about a male amputees after they just first go through that amputation is, am I ever going to have sex again? I mean, really, that comes out.
It does.
And I know a lot of ladies are like, why are they worried about that? I'm more worried if I can walk. Well, women have a different perspective at first.
Absolutely.
And it's like, why would you think you're any less? I tease. I think one of my friends and I put it very eloquently. I said, hey, it's less limbs to get in the way.
I have not thought of it like that, but that's perfect. I think I need to remember that for when I see these posts in groups and say that, just less limbs to get in the way.
It is. I've made a top 20 questions that I have been asked that have been like the most ridiculous questions you've ever heard, or statements have been said to you as an amputee. And the last one, Joel Goltree from Rush in Arizona, actually added to it. He said, 21, how can you have sex? And I thought about that I was like, I haven't had that one, but I can see him being, guys being asked that.
Right.
And it's like, wow, I wrote less limbs to get in the way.
And that's true. And I'm sure for some of the non-amputees that listen to the podcast, hopefully they enjoy that and get a little bit of a laugh out of that. But that's a good perspective to have.
It really is.
It is. So when we talk about dating, did you have any kind of apprehension or fear when you first started dating as an amputee?
No, really, because Patrick, who is my husband, he and I already had a great foundation. We have known each other at the time for almost 16 years. We both worked together for 7 of those years, and we had been friends all the way up. Unfortunately, he went through a divorce after 22 years of marriage, not his choice. And so did I. My late husband is no longer. And so we decided to just kind of start dating. So he already had a foundation with me. He knew who I was. And he did point out, point blank, right up front, he said, it does not bother him that I don't have a limb. And it's like, well, that means you don't have a foot fetish, so we're good. So all right. And that was good. I mean, because he knew who I was. I did have, like I said, an old boyfriend that at the time, Paul, there was just no way. I was really shocked. I really was, because Paul and I could have dated, and it just blew my mind that missing a leg was just too much for him. And I just sat there and like, really? You've known me before this, and this is, wow. I mean, because we were stayed friends, but I haven't even seen him since.
Wow. It's really unfortunate that happens, and that, in a different context, I had people tell me, people who were friends and we're no longer friends now, but they say, I don't know how to handle this. And I wish I'd have been, I don't want to say smart enough, because I don't feel I was any less smart, but I wish I'd have had just thought about it to say, it's not about you, it's about me in that moment. And, but, I think we fail to do those things sometimes, and it's hard for people. And for me personally, I'm like, why is it so hard? I'm still the same person that I was. I'm just, I can only count to 15 now instead of 20. That was the only real difference, I thought, at the time.
It's a very good statement to have. I mean, it is. I've watched people go through it. It's like, if anyone going to want me, are you kidding? You get cool hardware. You're like an Iron Man now. Come on. This is awesome. I bet you can have that. And we can get into the sexuality of it even. I mean, I've heard just even how nerves change for AKs and how much more stimulated they get. Things like that. I mean, which blows your mind. You go, really? There is. But again, if somebody is not going to take you for who you are, whether you're wheelchair bound or missing a finger or whatever, think about how many of their own scars they have that you can't see, that they don't even put out there. That's a shame. And I don't want anyone to sit back and go, God, I'm never going to date again. You are going to date again. It's not a problem. You may not be around quality people. That's where you need to change your focus. You are the average of the people you hang around with. And if you're hanging around with shallow-minded people, that's what you're going to get.
Absolutely. So as you're navigating the dating world, did you encounter devotees?
Oh, God. Now, as you pointed out earlier, you had put this out there with that, devotees are not necessarily bad ones. There's devotees for music. There's devotees for this and that. But this particular group, I had never heard of before. Oh, my God. It blew my mind. I got asked out more in my life within 2 weeks than ever. I was like, what the hell is this? I had guys pointing out that they're women. They're trying to have me show my limb and all this. I had to go look it up. I was like, what is this? Why? And that to me is a problem in itself. I bet it's one thing to now you have the opposite. You have somebody who only is interested in you because you're missing a limb versus taking you as you are. So now you have the other extreme. And I don't think that's cool. I had one devotee who actually had a long conversation with me, which I allowed at the beginning, that actually said, well, if you prefer blonde men, how is it any different that I prefer people without limbs? I said, the difference is you may prefer that, but you're focusing only on that.
Right.
That's a problem. When you're targeting that, that's too much. I'm not into that. I mean, I may prefer blondes, but I date brunettes, too.
Right.
That's where I had the issue. Oh God.
And you're, and that's a great way to explain it. And I'm going to throw this in there because there's going to be people listening who don't know. So for anyone who may not know or understand, the word devotee in and of itself, not a negative term. People are devotees to various music genres, sports teams. When it's football season, I could very easily be called a devotee of the Steelers. Don't come around me when I'm watching football because that's not pretty. However, when we talk about amputee devotees, we're talking about individuals with a psychosexual disposition for amputees, which means they're aroused by amputees. And I think it affects female amputees more than males because as a male, I have never encountered this. And that's okay. I'm okay never to encounter it. But we see it all the time. We see it. They come into groups. They try to go to the conferences and they're sexually aroused by someone because they're missing a limb.
And there's even the ones that also are in desire, the other type of devotees that desire to become an amputee because it is sexually stimulating to them as well.
Absolutely. It is. And it's not a normal pathology. It's not a normal psychology. It's something that's very abnormal. And unfortunately, a lot of these individuals, just to use, probably the most brash word I can, they're perverts. And
well, let's call it what it is.
Call a spade, right?
You got it.
And I don't, and ultimately, I don't mean to disrespect them as people or whatever, but, they're not going to understand how much of a problem it is for amputees and especially for women, how it makes women feel. And I've had many women say, they feel unsafe when devotees are around, like they could literally be in some type of danger. And no one should have to feel that way ever for any reason.
Yes, I agree with you. There's one amputee lady I know that was standing in line for a movie, I believe, and a devotee jumped out of the crowd, went over and actually licked her limb.
Oh, my goodness. Licked
her socket. I mean, unbelievable. She was in such shock. I mean, who does that?
Wow.
I know the guys ask, where are ours? I've had that asked. They go like, where are our devotees? I mean, I know you guys would just live over it. But I think you guys would get annoyed too.
It would be very annoying. And like I said, I've never encountered one. I would imagine that a female who is specifically attracted to a male just because he's an amputee is far more rare than a male being attracted to a female amputee. Because we just don't hear about it if it happens as much.
Right. I would agree with that. I'm sure they're out there. You just don't hear about it.
They're out there. And if any male amputees are listening and you have encountered a female devotee, please get with me on Facebook. We need to talk. I want to hear your story.
Yeah, that I do.
We will call that episode Amp Life After Dark.
Probably a good way to put it.
So, and speaking of that, and so we're able to joke and whatnot about the things that we deal with and face. And I'll throw this out there, we are a family-oriented podcast, and so I want to keep things PG. But as you know, men and women adapt differently to life and sexuality following any illness, but especially becoming an amputee. For me personally, I had zero interest in sex in the months following amputation, and it was mostly because of my self-inflicted body image issues. And you have these thoughts creep in, and I would ask myself, is my wife even still going to find me attractive? Does being an amputee make me undesirable to my wife? And so it really messed with my mind for quite a little while. And it was during that time, I said, hey, you know what? I'm going through the 5 stages of grief. I want to talk to a psychologist. And so I was able to work through all of that just fine. But I had to work hard to figure it out and to really get through it and to be able to open up to someone. But a lot of people don't want to open up and they don't want to talk about body image and sexuality and their views and feelings about it. And so I want to ask you, as an amputee, especially as a woman, Did becoming an amputee change your views or your thoughts on sex and sexuality?
At first it did, but as I, adjusted to it, it didn't matter. I mean, it didn't make a difference to me. And I mean, honestly, when I think about it, going back, because I mean, most people, as you said, it was a while until you engaged back in sex with your wife. And she's been obviously a very patient lady and things like that. So that's fantastic. My boyfriend, Pat, who's now my husband, he was, very much the same way. He wanted to make certain that he made sure that I knew that he thought I was beautiful, that he loved me. When the time came, it was the right time, things like that. And it never had to do with the limb. I can't even pinpoint the first time that we had sex after amputation because that's just how he operated. And he was just treating me exactly the same way as before. And that's a different, I didn't actually go through a lot of the struggle with that because I already had confidence in who I am as a person. But I agree. I know what you're saying. As a woman, you go, okay, I have to bring it in a different perspective. It doesn't have to be a sexual thing, but also a different way. My own daughter, she's 14. She's a teenager. They're definitely going through body images like
right.
What am I and so forth. And if I ever take my own socket off, just to give an idea, my daughter is creeped out by my limb. I mean, just creeped out. And it's funny. I'll threaten to hit her with it and stuff because I'm a mean mom, but just to give her, but she is so, it's gross. It's wrinkly. It's whatever, and you you have to laugh, but that actually probably kicked it into gear for me more that she's the one who's making me feel inferior based on my body image, or I'm letting her, because it's not really her doing it. It's me letting that in because she's a person of influence in my life.
Right.
And that's where, and then that questions my sexuality, that questions my image, the whole gamut. But I have to sit down and say, does it really define who I am? And it doesn't. And my daughter's just going to have to suck it up. Okay. and that's the way I put it. She's just going to have to suck it up. But it is, that's where you get the question. When you start doubting yourself and saying, am I a whole person? And questioning it, you're the one who's doing the damage to you. Or if you're taking somebody's, crud, like my teenager, who's not trying to be malicious, just expressing her feelings, and you start questioning yourself, that's where your downfall is. And that's tough. If somebody worthy treats you beautiful and caring and loves you for who you are, you wouldn't even think twice whether you had a leg or not, or an arm or not, or anything.
And that's a great point and I try to tell myself that it has nothing to do with being an amputee. But when I see, and admittedly, okay, this is how I said, I'm a boy, and as such, I like pretty girls. Okay, I'm married. I'm faithful to my wife, but just like my wife likes, I don't know, Taylor Lautner or whoever it is this week, I don't even know. When I see, a girl that's pretty, okay, I'm like, okay, she's pretty. And, whether or not it's an amputee or whether or not they have another disability, that never enters my mind. It's just like, oh, they're pretty or they're cute or whatever word you want to throw in there. And I really want to believe that that's the person I am, and that it has nothing to do with, having an amputation or being disabled. But, these reactions that we sometimes get, people, whether it's looking at someone to date and say, oh, well, I'm not going to date them because they're an amputee or they have this issue or that issue. And you mentioned your daughter's response, which is fascinating to me. I don't have children. I have a dog and a fish. Those are my kids. And so like my dog, he's like, whatever, he'll go and he'll look at the socket. And I just told him, I said, you just don't lift your leg on it. Is the only thing.
And he'll treat you like you had the leg anyway. So he'll shove you around. I have one too. So I mean, they don't care.
No. And I have, it's weird because I've just started, I used to like shooing with my leg or whatever when he'd get in the way. I've just started doing that with, on my prosthetic side. And I'm like, oh, I didn't know I could do that with this leg. So it's, so I don't have kids. I have two nieces, but they've never seen me, without the prosthesis on. So they're just like, yeah, whatever. That's just the way it's been since they've been born. They don't know anything different. And when you talk about her reaction, oh, it's wrinkly skin or that's gross or whatever. That's just, I don't think that's a perspective that a lot of us sometimes get to hear. Because, and you're right. I like your attitude that she has to get over it. because, sometimes I think we tend to, as humans, want to play into those things, and we are who we are.
It's true. I mean, and it's funny, the irony on all of it is my daughter was born deaf. Okay. Yeah. And she has cochlear implants. So she has her own disability. And she was bothered when people were seeing her cochlear implants and stuff like that and asking, what are those? And she didn't want to be sectioned out, so to speak. So I kind of get my giggles when she goes, ew, and all this. I'm like, hey, honey, what the heck is going on here? You had this same problem in a different area. What is wrong? So yeah, she's seen the perfect, this is what the perfect image is supposed to be. This is what we're intended to be. So it's new. And her favorite word today is cringy.
Cringy.
So yeah, cringy. It's the new teen word of, oh, I look, oh, gross. It's cringy. So hasn't used it yet on that, but she is kind of grossed out. Yeah, she's got to learn. I mean, she has to learn, and I want her to learn, because that's another thing. It's a bias that I'm trying to educate my child to realize that you shouldn't have.
Right. Absolutely. And so, as we've talked about, a lot of amputees struggle with body image, social acceptance, loving themselves, seeing themselves as someone to be loved and appreciated by others. Some amputees struggle silently with their feelings regarding sex and sexuality. What advice would you give people who are struggling with these very personal issues?
Talk to someone. I mean, really. I mean, there's a lot of us out there that are willing to talk about it. I'm one of them. I mean, I wouldn't care if anybody just reached out to me on Facebook or anything like that and said, hey, I'm really struggling with this. How'd you get past? Let's talk. We've talked about it at Dallas Amputee Network about breaking off into subgroups and having this discussion. When you have 200 plus members, it's not like a group setting discussion you necessarily have. There's a lot of people who want to be private about it. Have those meetings. Get with people who experience it. Have a round table. Go to dinner, at a quiet place and have those discussions, because believe me, you're not the only one who questions it.
Right.
And I would hate anyone to suffer in silence when you have people who've been there, done that, bought the T-shirt.
And that's it. You're right. Talk to someone. Get involved in support groups. We have 3 here in the Pittsburgh area. And one of the things I hear a lot of people say, well, there's no group in my area. That may be true. Start one. If there's not a support group in your area, start one.
True. And I do want to mention, since you brought up, I do want to mention that at the Amputee Coalition Conference this year, there is going to be a meeting, a board, where they have 1 female, 1 male, specifically young, that aren't married. So we're talking about sexuality. So even if you don't necessarily want to reach out and talk to somebody, if you're going to the conference, look into that meeting, sit in, listen to what they say. It's going to be a question type board. Highly recommend it.
Yeah, that's a great resource, that you mentioned that, because there's going to be a lot of amputees of all different levels at the conference. Some of us have been an amputee for a while. Others are new amputees. Some won't even be walking yet, without a device or without a wheelchair. And so if you're an amputee and you're at the conference and you have questions or there's things you wonder about, there are going to be so many activities and people that will be able to help get the information that you need and that you want to help you move along in your life. And so I highly recommend, and if you've never been to the Amputee Coalition's National Conference, I highly recommend it. It's coming up, the August 2nd through the 4th? 6th.
This is my first one. I've only been an amputee 20 months, so I'm all gung-ho and excited.
It's my first one as well. I had Jack Richmond, Amputee Coalition CEO, on a podcast a few weeks ago, and we had a great time together. And so I'm really looking forward to going to Louisville. And someone might say, wait, you're going and you're not, and you're kind of sketchy on the dates. Well, let's see, I'm checking into the hotel on the 1st and leaving on the 6th. So for me, that's the conference.
I'm coming in on the 2nd and I'll leave on the 6th. I'm coming in late the 2nd because I have to work. It really, there's some classes on Wednesday if you want to go, but the big conference Thursday, Friday, and Saturday.
Yep. Awesome. So we're going to look forward to having that time together in Dallas. So today, Linda and I have been discussing body image and sexuality for amputees. And if you find yourself struggling with these issues, first thing is talk to someone. Reach out. If you're in one of the groups and you see us in one of the groups, reach out to one of us. If you don't want to post something publicly, that's what Messenger's for. We'll be happy to talk to you any way we can. But we hope this episode helps you understand that your amputation does not define you. You are intelligent, you are valuable, and you are beautiful just the way you are. Linda, thanks for joining me on Amp Life. It has been a pleasure.
Thank you. I've really enjoyed it.
Absolutely. You've been listening to Amp Life, the #1 podcast for amputees, hosted by an amputee, and brought to you by Dilatory Orthotics and Prosthetics, located in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. If you've enjoyed today's episode, leave us a review on iTunes or give us a like on Facebook. I'm the Brian Moe. I invite you to visit our website, www.amplifepodcast.com, or check us out on Facebook at Amp Life Podcast.